Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Courageous Conversations. Wow, here we are again, having a courageous conversation. Dr. Philip Nelson, always a pleasure to see you. I am thrilled to be able to talk about the world and issues and everything else. Thank you so much to Nationwide for giving us a platform. Thank you to Nicole for trying to keep us on task. Good luck with that. And thank you to all our listeners for coming back and checking out to hear what Dr. Nelson and I have to say about the world and the veterinary world and everything in general. So, Phil, always a pleasure.
I want to add my thanks, but Peter never gives me a chance. But I just thought I better insert that, let you know I'm not totally unappreciative of the roles that each of you play. How are you, my friend? How are things going?
Like a hamster in a wheel, just keep spinning and spinning and spinning, and every once in a while get off, eat, go to the bathroom, and climb back on the wheel.
You could just wear a diaper, and then you never have to get off.
Oh, that depends.
So what's on your mind today? Anything?
I've stopped trying to watch the news and keep up with everything that's out there. Recording this shortly after one of the best Super Bowls that I've seen, and truly like to celebrate good football. I wasn't quite as enamored with the commercials as I've seen in the past, but it does make for about 4 hours of entertainment on a Sunday afternoon.
You know, it's amazing that you would say that, because, and particularly about the commercials, I'm sorry, because you said several things, and I agree. It was one of the best Super Bowls that I had seen as well. Especially, I was actually surprised. I think my wife was equally surprised at how interested she was in it, with it being as defensive as it was for the entire game. It wasn't until I made the comment that there were only 3 touchdowns in the entire game that she started adding, and she said, "You're right." And she said, "And why was I so interested?" I said, "Because neither team got more than 10 points away from each other, which kept the drama in the game."
Right.
And you think you like high scoring games, but you never, but even high scoring games within 10 points of each other is not as exciting as a defensive game within 10 points of each other.
What the Super Bowl provides for me, and maybe a little bit more so at this time because I was at somebody else's house, but it provides a way to separate yourself from the world's issues that are going on around you and focus on football and commercials and food for 4 hours. Many times the Super Bowl is a social event, as well as an athletic event. It does allow for separation from, some of the news that's going on.
To an extent. And I appreciate what you just said. I want to share a story with you that you have now probably explained for me, the other side, if you will. I went to play golf one day with my son, and an elderly lady, well, I say elderly, she was probably my age, but still
She's elderly. Right. Then you're right.
Shut up. Pulled up in her golf cart behind me, and we started talking. And she was telling me how she needed to get her game over so she could get back to watch the game. And I believe at the time we were approaching the NBA playoffs. And she said, and she made the comment that she couldn't watch football anymore because of the kneeling. And she made the comment, went to football to watch football. She didn't want to be reminded of social issues at a football game. Now, I bristled because essentially I took it as those athletes should just be athletes and not talk about the problems that they have to deal with being athletes, particularly if the athletes are predominantly Black in a society that treats that demographic differently. If they're predominantly Black or Hispanic, I can see why the white athletes might pass on it. Even they may want to express themselves in the venue where they have an audience, where they may be able to have an impact on their fans, to say that all is not, I almost used the word hunky-dory, all is not well here. And Colin Kaepernick was actually just trying to point out the problem of police brutality and the disproportionate impact that it was having on a demographic in our society. You know, the kneeling during the national anthem was actually borrowed from the practice of servicemen who kneel during the national anthem in honor of those that they lost. And Colin Kaepernick just borrowed that same gesture, and it suddenly became anti-patriotic. I realize I'm spoiling your buzz about the Super Bowl here, but I am saying I didn't know why my response to her was so visceral. And again, it goes back to what we talk about all the time: perspective and privilege as well. Because you see, she had the privilege to be able to say, "I'm going to forget about this for now." Whereas, where does a LeBron James get a chance to express himself to the largest group that he can express his feelings to? It's in his workplace. Now, he's rich enough that he can actually choose another venue, you know, like the Wall that he produces or whatever. But I appreciate the fact that I now understand her, because that's how I look at Christmas. That's how I look at birthdays. That's how I look at anniversaries. I want to forget everything else and just enjoy that. And that does not make the person uncaring if they don't want to see don't practice racism on the back of a basketball jersey. But at the same time, I am ambivalent about it, because I wonder, when can I capture your attention?
You remember the 1968 Olympics?
Yes. And the fist? Yes. Yes.
What do you think the response would have been if Colin Kaepernick, instead of kneeling, just put a black glove on and put up a fist?
Well, it apparently didn't matter, because it was a Black man doing something differently.
Right.
Because as I said, he used a respectful gesture.
Right.
You know, and nobody, and most people don't know where the gesture came from, that was borrowed from. But those that did chose to ignore it and rephrase it and to redefine it. You know, now I have a counter story too. I watched CBS panel that was preparing us for the Super Bowl for 3 hours before the Super Bowl got started, and they did a piece on the Seattle Seahawks when they had the boom defense, and the Black members of that defense team became vocal about police brutality, and they went back to their communities and they talked about it, and they realized that they had a pulpit that they could use, and they became aware of their influence, and they went back to their communities to try to promote change, and they were very respectful of the police. They knew that their communities were much more dependent on the police than most others. but it was a two-edged sword in their community. And as you've heard me say before, in most uh, large cities that have heavy concentrations of minorities, the police are the impact of the police are more to protect the rest of the city from the tenants, from the inhabitants of the tenants and slums, rather than protecting all the citizens. But as they discussed it, they appropriately gave kudos to these individuals for speaking out. My problem with the entire presentation was they never mentioned Colin Kaepernick, who has been blackballed, as you know, since he started that movement. It caused a problem for the NFL. At least a third of the people who watch football threatened to stop watching football, like this young lady did that at the golf course, and it became an economic issue. Even the former president started promoting the possibility of boycotting NFL games because someone spoke their mind. And I was upset. I actually posted it on my LinkedIn because I felt that they had capitulated to the fear of speaking out, which is something that appears to be catching on in just about every aspect of our lives. Haley is now being attacked simply because she chose to continue to run.
Well, wait to see what happens with the Supreme Court when they start to rule on some of these things. I mean, we've seen it with local judges and local lawyers and local individuals who have become a target for not, quote unquote, capitulating to what another side has to say.
So. And my problem is that we want to protect freedom of speech in every aspect but voting.
Yeah, well, you're protecting freedom of speech by limiting who's going to speak when you start threatening people. That's not freedom of speech.
Thank you. I was about to say, you're not protecting freedom of speech. You are selectively applying the freedom to speak.
Well, you are debarking people because they are barking.
Everybody has the right to bark.
Right.
You know, and I can't think of a better cancel culture than to go after your husband who is serving in the service in another country. I don't understand how a person can run for president and get caught making salacious statements about women, using words that I cannot use on this podcast.
Well, you can use them, but Nicole will edit them out.
About where I can hold a woman, etc., and then run for president. I don't understand how a person who runs for president can pay hush money to a porn star for having sex with a porn star while being married and breaking his vows of fidelity and become president. I don't understand how a person can be convicted of rape in a civil proceeding and continue to run for president for a second time. I don't understand how that same person then goes after a marriage and is the first public person to suggest that the marriage of an opponent may be falling apart for political reasons and still be a front runner for a given party. And finally, and still continue to run for president. And finally, I don't understand how that person can then attack a district attorney in Georgia who may have had a illicit relationship, albeit mutually consents under mutual consent why she can't do her job if he can still apply for his.
We talk about, from a leadership standpoint, leading by example, walking the walk and talking the talk. If what you just mentioned is an example of leading by example, what essentially some prior leaders have said is that we don't have laws for everybody, because if I can do this, everybody else can do it. I mean, it's basically saying that there are no rules when it comes down to slander. There's no rules when it comes down to what people say. And I think the whole society has gotten very mean over the past decade, maybe less. And we're seeing it in social media. We're seeing it on TV. We're seeing it in the way people react with guns. We've become mean. And I think some of it is because we have given a platform to an individual from a leadership standpoint who is mean. And it's setting a bad example for our kids. It's setting a bad example for our country. And I mean, even some of the comments about going after, Russia should go after NATO countries if they don't pay their bills, that's just plain mean. And so when did we become a mean people?
Well, first of all, I am not going to group everybody under that meanness, but I will accept that rationalizing that meanness is just as bad and is a step toward that meanness. I totally agree that, but I totally agree that there is a retraction from our aspirational ideals. That there has been there's a certain group of people who believe that we need a king in order to correct whatever's wrong in our society, because they believe they know what's wrong and they know what the correction is. Again, though, it's that myopic bias that they are serving from. They cannot accept that there may be alternative measures or alternative outcomes that are in alignment with our traditional views of democracy. And in order to achieve their myopic view of democracy as it relates to their aspirations, they're even willing to have a dictator for a day or a king for the next 4 years, because they believe that they're already in alignment with that king, that dictator. And yet they ignore it. Is so much easier to be a traitor of the Republican Party than it is to be a traitor of the United States.
It's interesting as I look back over the past 22 minutes that we've been speaking, and I started talking about sports as a distraction from world issues. Somehow we got off on the golf course and Colin Kaepernick, and now we've come full circle back to 2024 and the issues that are in the headline news. It's just starting to point out that it's harder and harder to separate everything out in our day-to-day conversations, because I was really starting to celebrate the fact that we, for at least 4 hours or so, were able to maybe not focus on some of the critical issues that are out there.
But you know what? And I apologize again if I put a buzz on you, but you should still celebrate it. That 4 hours was still sacrosanct for you. You didn't think about it for that 4 hours, right? Now, you want that to last as long as you can. Apparently, it lasted until just now. But the world is still there. That was Disney World for us for 4 hours, and I'm glad we enjoyed it. Right? Now, it wasn't as much for me because I was upset about the story, not upset, but I felt that I saw an incursion of politics, if you will, I saw an incursion of the national psyche in an incomplete report. I'm having problems now. We've talked a lot about how the news used to be delivered, right? And part of that discussion was about the courage of reporters to hold people accountable, right? Now we're sending people to Russia to interview Putin, knowing that they're going to make it back safely because they're not going to ask the hard questions. They're going to essentially give Putin the pulpit so that he can exacerbate the disinformation that we're getting from Russia. Why isn't that traitorous?
Well, it's an interesting topic, and I don't know where it all fits in, because it is also about people who are only worried about themselves from a self-serving standpoint.
Well, isn't that what our former president has instilled in this culture now?
He's instilled meanness into this culture now.
Or selfishness. You can call it what you want, right?
Narcissism, misogyny.
I'm sticking with your selfishness principle here. The only reason Ukraine is not getting its money is because he's still mad at the president of Ukraine for not helping him with Biden when he was president.
Right.
The only reason that the border bill failed is because he needs an issue, a political issue to fight for in the election attempt. Isn't that selfish? This is not. There is no way in hell that anybody can look at that and say that the actions of the Republican Party recently on the border bill is out of concern for American interests.
Let me take a step on that one for just a second. The failure to act for the greater good was because of the fear of somebody being mean to them.
Okay.
Seriously, isn't that why?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
If the greater good was to pass that bill, but they're afraid that the past occupant of Pennsylvania Avenue is going to say nasty things.
Or primary them out.
Correct. Basically, it's a sign of meanness.
Yes. It's a sign of how you're right.
They have a person
who will use his political power in a very mean, unfair, undemocratic way. And that undermines personal opinions.
And that's why I want to go back to Disneyland. I'm tired of mean. I mean, give me Mickey and Minnie and Snoopy. No, not Snoopy. I'll take the Seven Dwarfs, even Grumpy.
The problem with your approach, with your suggested approach, and I happen to know that you're being somewhat facetious, and so I'm not attacking you. But the problem with that is that everybody who does that enables the meanness.
Well, how do we disable the meanness?
Let's put it this way.
Wait, Phil. You know how we disable the meanness? Vote.
Okay. Yes, but voting, if all you do is vote in silence, then you lose votes to fear. So absolutely you should vote. But discussions of the vote before the vote is critical. Tonight I'm going to a book reading by Joy Reid on the love affair between Medgar and Myrlie Evers. He believes so strongly in fighting injustices in probably the worst place you can live at that time, that he he lost a life that he knew he was going to lose. And why? It was no surprise that he was shot. That is, we won't speak up because we might lose a position in Congress. We won't speak up because somebody might talk about our husband. We won't speak up because somebody from a certain demographic of a certain party might start calling us and harassing us on the phone. Where is the courage it takes to change Jim Crow laws that are robbing your children of appropriate opportunities and perpetuating a illegal state in a country that's supposed to be promoting one man, one vote? And don't tell me you don't understand the impact of terrorism, psychological terrorism on the voting process. It's not that simple. If we can't discuss the issues, then we can't adequately decide how to vote.
We're in a very interesting point in time because discussions, which used to be done in an auditorium with a panel or a round table, has now started to take place virtually.
Oh, yes, and I remember. But now let's remember we're one of the things that this counterculture movement has injected into the populace is it's not just meanness, it's a disregard and disrespect for the institutions that we developed in our imperfect government to allow freedom of speech. But if you're going to disregard the courts, if you're going to disregard the bureaucrats that have a purpose to write laws that are effective, and then make them the criminals, then make them part of the deep state, and then insert spies of your own into the deep state, into the quote unquote deep state. You are just part of the insurrection that became public on January 6th.
Bill, we are so off in left field, and I'm gonna wrap this up with one statement. The fact that Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift won the game is going to determine the election in November. And so maybe there will be some good news that comes out of a sporting event that we watched for 4 hours. But in the eyes of a large portion of the American populace, that relationship has tainted the election already, and we haven't even gotten there.
Well, you'll forgive me if I don't rely on that outcome based on the outcome of a football game. But yes, I get your point. Very well put. And
I really think that's a good place to stop on this conversation because we're going to head into overtime and we don't have any commercials left.
Yes, I know. I understand. I think we visited both sides, but the bottom line is that the next 8 months are going to be pretty interesting, I think, for everybody. And
there's a lot of adjectives I would use. Interesting is just one of them.
Yes,
but
also going to be demanding.
Yeah, but listen to the courageous conversations that we have. Start your own courageous conversations, and we know some of you aren't going to agree with what we have to say, and we'd love to hear from you. I just think it's important that we have conversations, and I don't mean mean conversations. I mean conversations where you're talking to a neighbor and you agree to disagree, and that you can look somebody in the eye and hear what they have to say, listen to the words that they're using, and appreciate their position, and recognize that they're a human being as well. We can't continue to be mean. We need to be learning, we need to be improving, we need to be having crucial conversations. So thank you very much.